Welcome, the first edition of Rounding the Bases. My name is Jason Priester, alongside Ashby Mixon. We're from the Clemson Insider. Appreciate everybody that's tuning in tonight. How you doing there, Ashby?
I'm doing great, JP. How are you? Happy first week.
It is finally here, and ask and you shall receive, because I've been asked to be doing this baseball show for a year now, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna be here every week. That's the plan. Starting out tonight, gonna go Thursday nights from here on out. Thursday night, 7 o'clock. Want to take a time to thank our sponsor before we get started, Mission Roofing, the go-to company for all your residential roofing needs in the upstate of South Carolina. Whether it's small repair, full roof replacement, or insurance restoration, Mission Roofing will provide a solution. Check out their Facebook page or call or text. The number is rolling at the bottom of the screen, 864-419-8173. All your roofing inquiries, Mission Roofing. It's here. Clemson's going to leave tomorrow. They're headed to Texas. Not your typical opening weekend. Starting with some legit competition this year. 2 top 25 teams, Oklahoma State, Arizona. Finish up with Ole Miss on Sunday. They'll probably be ranked at some point during the season. Tough test for these Tigers as they begin the season.
Absolutely. It's going to be, I think, different than it's ever been in the last, 20 years. I think it's always been at DKS. So I think you have a lot of new factors with it being at a big league stadium, first of all, and playing really tough competition. I think you're going to know some things pretty quick. Whereas if you're playing, at home, first couple weeks, you might not know what's going on with your team nearly as quick.
Yeah, I agree. Typically you don't get into the stronger competition until 2 or 3 weeks into the season when they play South Carolina. This year, not quite the case. They'll have played several different quality opponents before that series even gets here. And I think Eric Backus kind of feels the same way. He said it a bunch of times. He can't wait to get there and see his team get punched in the mouth and see how they respond. But he kind of talked about something you just touched on, playing in that big league stadium, how those guys might respond to that. Sounds like they're going to do a little bit of a walkthrough and get what he called the Hoosiers moment, out of the way, where, we're going to them is still, 90
15
feet.
feet,
Yeah.
10 feet.
It's still the same distance from home to first, from home to the pitcher's mound. Get that out of the way, and then they'll get things underway Friday. But this is a team that's got to, he said this multiple times too, this is a team that's got to replace 70-something home runs from last year. That's a lot of production to replace. He navigated the portal really well, added guys like Luke Gaffney, Colin Priest. You got guys like Tristan Becerra coming back. I don't know that they can replace 70 something home runs, but I don't know that they have to. How do you kind of see that?
I agree. I think that's a lot of production and a lot of veteran talent to replace, but I think you look at last year, and look at the transfers that came in and what all they were able to do, you know? And so I think it bodes really well of how those guys came in and fit right in with the culture. But I think, no matter who you are, no matter who you're losing that kind of power is gonna be something that takes a minute to figure out. And I think, you're not gonna be totally sure what role everybody's playing and, filling those holes in the first weekend.
Exactly. You don't know exactly what this team's going to be. I remember going into last year thinking that team might not have a lot of pop in the lineup.
Yep,
Turns out they had plenty of pop. That might end up being the case again this year. You know you're going to get some power from Becerra and Gaffney and Priest. Um, there's probably a couple other guys that I'm not thinking of right off the top of my head that'll hit some home runs. I imagine Canarella's going to hit double digits in home runs. He did last year. You don't need a guy to hit 25, but if you can get a bunch of guys hitting 7, 8, 9, 10, then you'll be okay.
absolutely. Did I know you had interviews with Coach Backish today. Did he give any kind of indication of where Cam Cannarella is? Is he ready to play? Like, is he fully healthy at this point?
Yeah, he did address that today because Cam had kind of said he was at 85% a couple of weeks ago. Same day, Eric says, "Yeah, he'll be 100%." He said he's good to go. Maybe he might not be throwing full power yet, but he said 85% of his arms like 100%. That's like 100% of some normal guy's arm.
Anybody else's? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's gonna be
And
interesting to see him back in action and, watching him playing hurt all last season, how that's gonna transfer to a fully healthy Cam as the season gets going.
I'm curious to see how aggressive he is on the bases because he was
Same.
totally hamstrung last year. No sliding head first at all. They only allowed him to, get take. It was a small lead. He was only allowed to take so much of a lead, no more. He was also told to not crash into the wall, but he did that over and over again. Um,
And we're thankful for it.
yeah, I mean, it's gonna be. I'm kind of anxious to see how because he was very aggressive on the base pass as a freshman. If you get that guy, this year, that's a guy that's going to set the table for a lot of guys in the middle of that lineup.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
To me, some of the biggest questions lie with the starting rotation. You got Aiden Knock coming back. But after that, there's a lot of unknowns. And there's a bunch of guys that have started games in the past. Um, there's a lot of candidates. Sounds like Dane Moeller was one of those guys, and I'm sure everybody's seen by now that he suffered an injury Sunday. Eric Back has touched on that a little bit today. He was one of the guys that was waiting to see the doctor today. Well, they don't have a prognosis on him yet, but obviously he's not going to be pitching this weekend. So behind Knock, there's a lot of options. Knock being a right-hander, you think you want at least one lefty in that rotation somewhere. Darden's a guy that started a lot of games, but sounds like Justin LeGuernick's getting a real serious look at being one of the weekend guys. That would be interesting. Two lefties and a righty. Um, you know,
Absolutely.
how do you see that rotation kind of playing out?
I think it's gonna be interesting to see. I think in, interviews and since the fall when we've asked about it, I think the general response has kind of been, we're figuring out as we go. And I think looking at their roster, I think they have 9 or 10 freshman pitchers coming in this year too, which is interesting because, clearly that's been a priority in recruiting. And it's going to be interesting to see if any of them get a look or if they're going to go back to, an Ethan Darden, somebody that's been looking at it or had chances for a long time and pitched a lot of innings. It's going to be interesting.
A couple of weeks ago when I was up there for the Friday scrimmage, Saturday scrimmage, Sunday scrimmage. The two guys that started on Friday were Aiden Knock and Jacob McGovern. On Saturday, if I'm remembering right, I think it was Darden and LeGuernick. And on Sunday, it was Dane Moeller, I think. And I think it was Dane Moeller, and then one of the other freshmen. And I don't even want to, he's got the weird last name. Kike, Kick. I'm not sure how
Oh
to say it,
yeah,
but he was the other starter. So that kind of gives maybe an indication of what they're leaning. But if I'm guessing on a rotation right now today, I'm going with Canuck, Darden, LeGuernick as the three
there
guys.
we go. Mark it.
Man,
JP's
I
pick.
don't know about marking it, but at least to start the season, we'll see if it's the same. If it's the same thing come South Carolina. By the time South Carolina series rolls around,
Very true.
maybe they make some tweaks. You know, fingers crossed. Maybe you even have Moeller back by then. I'm not sure. I'd be banking on that, but even if you get best case scenario, you probably got to take it easy with him.
Absolutely. I totally agree. JP, you've been talking about this trip and going to Arlington, I think since we were sitting in the press box at the Stanford football game. I believe is when you told me you were going on this. How excited are you to be there? And what are some of the biggest questions that you hope to see answered outside of that starting
Yeah,
rotation?
that trip's actually why we're doing this on Tuesday night this week instead of Thursday. I'm not sure where I'll be at Thursday night at 7:00, but yeah, I've been anxious to get over there for this one for a while. Not just because I'm a baseball guy. Most everybody loves football, and I understand it. And I love football too. Love basketball, but I grew up playing baseball. That's always been my number one sport, and it always will be. And I love baseball for far more than any other sport. And when you look at the teams that are playing in this tournament, the teams that Clemson's going to be playing this weekend, it was just a no-brainer. I absolutely wanted to be there, and if I had the opportunity, I was going. So we are heading out first thing in the morning. But yeah, to me, one of the biggest things I'm going to be looking for is I think this is a team with a lot of depth. Probably more. There's probably going to be guys that are deserving of playing every day that aren't going to be able to play every day. Because this is something Beckett just talked about too. There's going to be guys who are deserving of being written in that lineup every day, and they're just not going to be able to do it because he's probably got 14, 15 guys, and there's only 9 spots in that lineup. I'm kind of anxious to see how, some of these position battles shake out, maybe at third base, how they handle the platoon at first, because I think you're going to see a lot of Gaffney and Colin Priest there. And who gets the opportunities at DH? Because there are a lot of options there. Some of that might depend on who's pitching that day, righty, lefty. But I do not envy Eric Bakich at all, having to write that lineup card out every day, particularly across the first 2-3 weeks of the season.
Absolutely. And I think, in some ways it's a great problem to have because you're dealing with, a lot of talent, a lot of experience. And I think especially when you're looking at depth, there's so many guys and especially some of the transfers that we brought in that have played so much college baseball. And you're looking at years and years of experience. And I think that's going to provide a lot to kind of the depth that we were talking about and the experience. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's going to be a really tough choice picking who is actually going out, that first game, those first couple weeks. How do you decide between those kinds of people?
At the scrimmages I was at, and I think I went to 1 or 2 in fall ball, I saw a lot of Josh Castellani playing third base, a freshman. He's a guy that's gotten talked about a lot. Eric Bakich has mentioned him a couple of times. There are a couple of freshmen who can make impacts on this team, but he being one, TP Wentworth being one. It'll be interesting to see if those guys can carve out a role for themselves. Maybe even a guy like Castellani win the job at third base. It's going to be interesting to see how those corner outfield spots play out because who's in center field. And then you got Jack Crichton, Tristan Becerra, the transfer Dominic Listy. I mean, again, there's depth. It is one of the strengths of this team, I think. And it should be fun watching some of that play out because Crichton's a guy that's kind of patiently waited his turn, started getting more opportunities last year. Um, Unlike a guy like Nolan Rocky, he doesn't transfer out and stays here, and that welcomes the competition, kind of embraces it with open arms. And he's a guy that I think's got a high ceiling. Can he hold off a guy like Dom Listy and Tristan Bissetta? Because I think Bissetta's got a guy that's got some potential to hit a lot of long balls this year. So the outfield's going to be fun to watch unfold. And I think third base is a spot that's got some positioning or a position battle that's been going on. You got probably Chufo at shortstop, Purify at second, Jake behind the plate. But those are kind of some of the only questions I have left as far as non-pitching goes.
That makes sense. Is Jack Crichton, is he allowed to play this opening weekend, or was his suspension just that last game, or is he with Coach Backage?
You know what? I think I haven't heard anything about him not being allowed to play, so I think he is. I think it's the
Okay.
coaches. Don't hold me to that 100%. That's a good question. I need to find that out. I'm getting old. I can't remember those kind of things.
It's okay, me neither.
Casey,
I'm getting old too.
I see Casey's here in the comments. He might know the answer to that. He's a big baseball guy too. But one of the strengths of this team, I think, is going to be the bullpen, particularly the back end. You got Reed Garris coming back, but they added a guy like Michael Gillen from Seton Hall, I think it was. That's a guy that's just been downright dominant at times. And you are adding him to a bullpen that's already got a lot of depth. They're going to have options when it comes to closing out games. Do you want to bring in the, sidearm or Malstead, who's kind of also been working more overhand in the offseason? Or do you want to go with the harder throwing guys like Gillen or Garris? And Garris is a guy that missed a lot of last year, so it's good to have him back. But I do think that's going to be a strength of this team, and that's not been the case every year in the past few years.
I totally agree. I think, like we were talking about, just the depth and the experience there, especially when you're, a closer or reliever, having that and being able to go into a college game already knowing what that's like, I think is going to be really, really huge. And, I think that was a very strategic transfer with Michael Gillen coming in, and it's going to be exciting to have so much depth there. And I think that's another question where you're looking at how many people are going to be able to, get looks, but you don't, you have more chances there. So I think we'll see a lot of them get opportunities.
And you have Jacob McGovern's back out there. I'm
Oh yeah,
assuming that at this point, and he's not
Seneca's
starting.
own.
And you get Casey Talent back, who missed all of last year.
And
Joe
most of the
Allen,
year before too, I think.
yep. Joe Allen's still around. The golly, what was his Chance Fitzgerald, who pitched a little bit last year.
Drew
Dvorsky's a guy,
Titsworth.
and Titsworth. That is a guy. I was saving him for last. That is a guy
Sorry.
that I think is going to take a big jump this year. From my understanding, he had a really good summer. I think he is primed for a breakout season. The scrimmage I saw him in a couple of years ago, he was really good. If he pitches like that during the season, he's going to have a role for himself.
Absolutely. And I think also he was really hyped coming out of high school too, which is great. Super, super high school player, lots of accolades coming into school. And I think did well, his freshman year, but I think his ceiling is really, really high. And I think that's exciting too, that you do have younger guys in addition to the older veterans that can come in and, really make a name for themselves in any given moment.
Scott brings up a good point here. When Cam got ejected in the regional year before last, he did have to sit out the next game. So maybe Jack does have to sit out, and it's just
I don't remember that he had to. I couldn't remember if that was just coach or not.
Now that I don't remember if he was. I think he was suspended. Because that was the elimination game that he
Mhm.
missed that day. I'm gonna have to excuse my dog. Somebody's knocking at the door. So maybe he does have to miss. I don't know. I'm not confirming or denying that, but if you are interested in watching these games this weekend, though, you're going to have to purchase a streaming service. It is not available on ACC Network Extra, ACC Network, or any of those things. I don't. It's a streaming service I've never even heard of. You remember the name of it?
Mm-mm. It was something I hadn't heard of.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. If you go to the Clemson website where they've got the baseball part of the website where they got the schedule listed, it's got a link to it, but I think it's $8-9 a month, so you could pay for 1 month and watch the weekend's games. Not
Cancel that subscription.
and then cancel. Yeah, it's not going to be on your regular streaming platforms. Just want to throw that out there, but let's talk big picture. In Eric Bakic's first season, he takes them to a no, it's not game changer. If you said it, I'd know it, but it's not game changer. First season, he leads them to 40 wins, a national seed. They have a home regional for the first time since before COVID. Obviously, they get eliminated by Tennessee in extra innings. Second year, 40 wins, national seed, all the way to the super regional first time since 2010. What lies ahead in year number 3?
I mean, I think the logical next step is Omaha, right? If we're improving every year, and I think that's what Coach Bakich has said too. And said when we talked to him last week, he was like, "We know that that's how we're going to be judged based on how far we can go in the preseason or in the postseason." And so I think that's the goal, that's the mindset as it always is, but I think there's an extra sting to it this year because of how close they came, and I think, hosting the regional, hosting the super regional, I think it really gives you the feeling of, "Oh, we're right there," and I think that's everyone's mindset going into obviously with the hopes of winning the national championship and playing for in a national championship game. So I think that's the logical next step, but obviously that's several months away. And right now you're looking at, what, an 11 a.m. game come Friday. And so I think that's one of those things where you have to start day by day, piecing wins together before you can even start looking that far ahead.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the logical next step is Omaha, and I've actually written that exact sentence. The logical next step is Omaha. I think they've got the pieces in place. I think they got the potential, but as you hit on just now, the one of the keys to that is not getting ahead of yourself. Just focus on what's in front of you. Um, and if you listen to Tristan Bassetta talk today, he talked a little bit about that. Just what can I do today to get better? I'm not worried about who we're playing Friday. I'm worried about the
Right.
day. Worried about Friday when Friday gets here. I think that's a good mindset to have. But I do think the way last season ended kind of left a sour taste in everybody's mouth because Coach Bakich talked about it today. They were right there, or one of those guys talked about it today. It might have been one of the players, might have been Bassett actually. He was they're right there. They were right there. I mean, so close they could taste it. Backus did say that if they would have held on and won that game, he was bullish on the fact that they were going to Omaha. He just knew they would win the next one, and it's hard to disagree with that. But going into last season, I wasn't sure they had the pitching to make that kind of run. I don't feel that way this year. I think they got a lot of options there. It's just a matter of how it plays out and who fits into what role and who cements themselves as a starter and reliever. And we might not, even after this weekend, we might not have all the answers to those questions.
I totally agree. And I think also at the same time, while you're thinking about last year and how that left a bitter taste in your mouth, how close you were, I think you really have to not let yourself focus on the good parts of last year as well, especially if you're somebody like a Cam Cannarella and Aiden Canuck, somebody like that. I think you have to be clean slate. How do I keep getting better? Because I think that's how you keep building instead of, being so focused on the things that they achieved last year. And yeah, we hosted a super regional and all that. I think that's the only way you keep moving forward is to say that was great, that was awesome. What are we doing now?
So let's look ahead to this weekend. Again, you start off with Oklahoma State, top 25 team. Then you get Arizona, top 25 team. Finish up with Ole Miss. How do you see this weekend playing out? Win all three, go 2-1, or even worse?
I think definitely have the potential to go 3-0. Absolutely. I think it's going to come down to if they settle in, if they can hit, and being able to build off of, what they started the game before. So I think just continuing to get better every game will be really crucial, but I don't know, it's gonna be interesting. You're playing against 2 teams, first 2 days, 2 veteran teams that, you know, Oklahoma State hosted their own regional last year, actually, I think got eliminated by Florida, um, in their regional, and so also a really stacked team returning a lot of people, so it's gonna be tough, but I think, like you said, if the pitching is what we think it is, that I think they're gonna be able to come home with some wins.
I'm going with 2-1.
2 and 1?
Yeah, I definitely have them winning. I feel really good anytime Aiden Canuck pitches. I saw him throw that cutter a couple weekends ago. It is game ready, ready to roll. Made Jake Gerald look silly on that thing. Um, yeah, the competition is too good to predict they're going to go 3-0. I think they're going to come home 2-1. Which one they lose, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But the biggest thing is, finding out some things about yourself. And I think we'll know a lot more about this team, a week from now after they've played these 3 games. You'll know probably another strength or two. Maybe you didn't know going into the weekend, maybe a weakness or two you didn't know going into the weekend. And, when we reconvene here next Thursday, it'll be a lot less speculating and a lot more talking about exactly what we've seen.
Absolutely, and not just seeing when we're playing each other and everybody's feeling great, at DKS and scrimmages, because we've talked a lot about that and things that we've seen, but like we said, playing in a big league stadium, playing ranked competition, it's gonna be really interesting to see who thrives in that kind of environment and maybe new strengths that we didn't even see coming. I'm excited to see some of those.
That makes 2 of us. We want to thank everybody who has tuned in to the debut episode, Rounding the Bases. We will be back next week on Thursday, 7 p.m. Want to thank our sponsor, Missing Roofing, your go to company for all your residential roofing needs in the upstate of South Carolina. Ashby, appreciate you being on. I think we're going to have a lot of fun this season.
I'm excited, JP. Travel safe. I hope it's so much fun.
I will see you next week. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.